I'm Paul Gobey with Leicester Library's Neighbourhood Services. Got a story to share with you from the North Pole. Whoa, the North Pole, that's a seriously cold place right at the top of the world. Snow and ice and wind and sleet. It's a cold, cold place. The story's called The Polar Bear's Son. There, the polar bears. They live in the North Pole, of course they do. It's a cold place. And in the village that the Inuit had was an old woman. She'd lost her husband. Her children had all gone and she was left on her own. But in those times, people were kind. People looked after her. They would share food with her. They would make sure she was all right because she was old and frail and often on her own. So when they went off hunting for seals, polar bears, sometimes whales, they'd make sure she got some of the catch. Some of the food was given to her. Not just the meat, but the blubber too. Now, blubber is the kind of oily, fatsy stuff that you find in whales and seals. It keeps them warm when they're in the cold, cold sea. And if you melt it and drink it down, sounds disgusting, but it keeps you very warm. Anyway, they'd share it with her. One day they'd been out hunting and they found this huge frozen bear in the ice. They cut it open and inside was a little bear. Again, it seemed to be frozen up and they said, well, this little bear will be just right for that little old woman. There, it'll keep her in food for weeks and weeks. So they carefully put it in a sack and took it back to the village and gave it to the old woman. She put it in the corner of her house. It was warm in there. You had a fire to keep the place warm in the cold, cold North Pole. And she thought, I fancy a bit of bear. She opened up the sack. She couldn't believe her eyes. The bear's eye blinked. His nose twitched. The bear was alive. It had been frozen deep in the ice and drip, 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 drip. It was slowly coming back. Wow, the old woman was delighted. First thing, she wasn't going to eat bear that day. No. This was going to be a son, a polar bear son for her, someone to share, someone to be with. Oh, this is a gift from the gods, she said. So she kept the little bear, fed him carefully on seal meat and melted blubber. And slowly over the weeks and over the months, he got bigger and bigger and bigger. Soon he was getting a bit too big to stay just inside the house. So it was arranged that he would go out and play with the children. The children were so excited, having a real live polar bear to play with. But all the time he was getting bigger and stronger. And he had to be careful when he was playing with the children to bring his claws in and to keep his mouth full of those sharp teeth closed. But still, he was big, he was strong, and the children sometimes cried when he pushed them or knocked them. So it was arranged that the bear would exercise with the hunters. So he would go out into the snow and run and wrestle and play, and all the time he was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And then one day the hunter said, you know what? Can we take Little Bear? Because that's what everybody called him. Even though he was a great big polar bear, everybody called him Little Bear. Can we take Little Bear hunting? Now, the old woman was a bit worried. You must be careful. He's not used to being out like that. We'll look after him. We think he will be a great hunter. So the hunters went off with Little Bear. Before he went, he embraced the old woman and they rubbed noses and he jumped through the window and out into the snow. Now the hunter said, the first thing to remember, you must always stay downwind of the seals. Otherwise, they'll smell you and they'll disappear. they went off to catch seals. Now, the trick to catching seals is to catch them when they come up out of the water. Now, most of the time, they're swimming under the ice, and you can't catch them there. But ever so often, they have to come up to take a deep breath of air. So they have little holes in the ice, and they pop up, take a deep breath, splash back down again, and disappear. And that's what the polar bear did with his wonderful scent, his clever nose. He could smell a seal for miles and miles and miles away, much better than the hunters. So he'd go down to the hole in the ice, and he'd lie down, a white bear in the white snow. He'd wait, not moving, for hours and hours, till the little snail popped his head up. Boosh! And the bear bashed him on the head, pulled him out of the ice, and there he was, one dead seal. Which is sad for the seal, but they had the food there. They needed to keep themselves strong and warm. And it went on like that all day. And the hunter said, "This is fantastic. This is the best hunter we have ever had. We will catch more seals today than ever before." And they went back to the village. And people were so happy because there was food for all. And of course, food for the old woman too. So it carried on like that for a while. The bear would go off with the hunters and catch seals all day long and then come back. But some people were jealous. Other villages had heard about this bear that somehow was catching all the seals, and they didn't like it, and they were jealous, and there was talking. And in fact, one villager even tried to attack Little Bear. So the hunters went back and said, "Oh, woman, you must make a collar for Little Bear so everybody knows who he is. Otherwise, they think he's just a big, scary, fierce polar bear, and accidents might happen. He might be attacked. He might be even killed." So the old woman carefully plaited a collar of hair and put it round Little Bear's neck. And when he had that, everybody could know that he was Little Bear, the special bear of the village, and he would help them with the seal hunts. And it carried on like that for months and months and months. And then one day, while they were out hunting, there was a terrible storm. And the hunters came back and said, "We can't find Little Bear. We don't know where he is." In the middle of the night, the old woman could hear something outside in the snow. She looked out through a window, and there was Little Bear. He jumped through the window and embraced the old woman, as he always did. And the old woman looked out, and there was a man lying dead in the snow. "Did you talk to Little Bear? Did you kill him?" Little Bear nodded his head. She thought, this is the end. This is trouble. What's going on? Why has he done this thing? And then the other hunters came back and they said, "He attacked Little Bear. It wasn't his fault. He didn't do anything. But in the end, to defend himself, he had to knock that man down. And with one blow of his mighty paw, he killed him." And the old woman was worried. "It doesn't work," she says. "Little Bear, a bear living among us. People are jealous. People are threatened by him. He must go back to his kind. He must go and live in the North Pole with the bears, because humans cannot be trusted. Humans, some of them, are very, very dangerous, and they will cause him trouble and could cause him his death in the end." So with tears pouring down her face and her heart breaking, she broke the collar round Little Bear's neck. She embraced him, and they hugged, and she wished him the best of good fortune and said, "You must go now into your own world, into the world of the bears in the snow and the ice, and keep away from humans. Will always bring you trouble." But before he went, she got some black soot out of the fire and rubbed it on his belly, so she would always know which polar bear he was, who Little Bear was, and she would never forget it. So they embraced once more, and Little Bear jumped through the window for the last time and disappeared off into the snow and the ice in the North Pole. And that was the end of that. People never saw him again. The old woman passed away a few years ago. But they heard legends, stories of this huge, enormous bear who was a mighty hunter in the snow and the ice. And everybody knew him because he had this big black spot on his belly. Well, that's the story of the polar bear's son. Bear, a story about bears, threatened as they are today. Enjoy that story. Share that story together.